Let's talk about the Perth property market and the economy. G'day, guys. My name's Sam Hadden. I'm a strategy specialist at Infinite Wealth, and I help clients to build strategic plans and build property portfolios for financial freedom. And I make a video roughly every 6 months just to go through some recent stats, what we've been seeing out there in the market, and how you can potentially use some of this information to make some educated decisions about what you think about the market, and is it the right time for you to be making your next investment, or would you like to start exploring property investing? So I made this for existing clients, but also just to share this public information with you, and also like to thank some of the sources that I get this from, such as CoreLogic, McCrindle, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and things like that. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a bit of a PowerPoint today. It's going to be a super quick video, hopefully really good value for your time, and always welcome your thoughts and questions and things like that in the comments as well. So without further ado, let me just start sharing my screen here, guys. So just a quick introduction to myself for anyone who doesn't know me. So my name is Sam Hadden, again, strategy specialist at Infinite Wealth. I've got 14 years experience investing. I now own 7 properties, and I'm certified in real estate, studied a bit of professional finance with the Monarch Institute. I'm also a member of the Property Investment Council of Australia, so I'm a big property nerd, a really passionate advocate. And I've assisted clients to buy over 50 properties worth over $30 million now in my journey as a professional as well. So some key points that I'm going to go through here, just an Australian market overview, WA economy, population growth, housing supply, affordability, and some Perth property statistics that you're going to find very interesting. So just a quick overview of the Australian property market. It is, again, always the biggest economy in Australia. So you can see here at the top of the list, residential real estate is over $10 trillion now. The superannuation industry is only 3.5. The Australian listed stocks, so the share market in Australia, 2.8 trillion, and commercial real estate, 1.3 trillion. And something I'd really like to point out, because it's been a big topic in the last couple of years, is household debt. Obviously, with interest rates going up and all that, household debt on residential property is only 2.2 trillion versus a value of 10.2 trillion, right? So it's basically like a less than 25% what we call debt to value ratio, right? So we definitely don't have a debt problem in Australia from that perspective. And then also it accounts for almost 57% of household wealth. So you want to ask yourself the question, does the government have a vested interest in keeping, the Australian wealth protected? Of course they do. Wealthy people spend more money, and that's what makes the economy grow, and etc. So, and then down the bottom here, so we've got 32%, 2.9 million households own their home without a mortgage. So there's a lot of households out there with zero mortgage. And then 26% are landlords, investors, getting rental returns and also some tax benefits there as well. But the overwhelming majority of the market is owner-occupiers, as always. So here's the next slide here. So this was updated in September 2023. We can see the red line is house prices starting in 2003, going from 376,000 all the way up to 990,000. I believe this was updated today, be over $1 million. So the median house price for a house in Australia, this is not just Perth, this is Australia-wide, is $1 million. So think about that. It's quite crazy. Now let's just turn our attention to the wealth of Australia. So this is a really interesting piece of data that the McCrindle organisation put out. So we'll start on the left. We got the incomes. So Australian average household income, 107,000, with WA now number 1 at $133,000. So we've overtaken the ACT, Canberra, which is just under $132,000. And we're much higher than Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, all those kind of things. So that's really, really interesting to think about when you look at, let's say particularly we're focusing on the property market, that, household incomes, people have a lot more disposable income in WA, which is definitely going to be driving prices up. And then what shocked me as well is that national household wealth. So the average is $809,000 per household. WA, $952,000, number 1 again. So very wealthy people in Australia, in Western Australia. So this is going to be a very interesting time in our economy. It's definitely our time in the sun. Turning our attention to the median house prices across Australia. So this is from CoreLogic in March, and we can see here that we have Perth sitting at $721,000, Adelaide $862,000, Brisbane $943,000, Melbourne $1,050,000, Canberra $1,090,000, and Sydney almost $1.6 million. almost all of the cities had capital growth last year, with WA, Perth leading the charge, 18.3% capital growth. Been a long time coming, guys. Definitely Perth's time in the sun, and there's plenty of room to grow, as you can see here, looking at these prices compared to other cities. Now, let's have a look at some stats in and around the fundamentals of the market to sort of say, okay, well, why would Perth continue to grow? Like, a lot of people are putting their attention here, particularly if you're an investor. I'm seeing a lot of over eastern states people see really, really good value in the Perth market, and also the locals now are starting to catch on as well. So when you look at sales that are happening, right? Like, I mean, this is a property where you can see down the bottom here, it's sold in August 2020, 687,000. CoreLogic's given that an estimated value of 985,000. So, you know, the best time to buy in Perth was kind of 2019, 2020. We were at the bottom of the market after about 5 to 6 years of pretty much no growth in Perth. But a lot of that was really playing catch up to where we were in the last boom, I would say. To be honest with you, really only the last couple of years have actually been actual growth, right? And I'll show you that in a second on graph. And then just to give you an idea of like what it is like out there on the market, if you are looking to buy an established property, you know, most properties are selling for 10, 15% over asking price right now. Here's a really good example. Offers starting in the high 700s, and the property sold for 835,000. Pretty decent house, 500 squares, you know, decent block. So highlights of WA. Lowest unemployment, 3.6%. Then we've got population growth, which is now number one, and again in Australia, 3.1%. I'll go through some stats in that in a second. Wage growth, 4.7%, second in Australia. Economic growth, number one. $33 billion worth of infrastructure over the next 4 years. We've got a big budget surplus, mining industry and all that sort of stuff going very strong as well. And then we've got the wages. So 4.7% was the wage growth from December to December over a 12-month period of time. That is the second highest wage growth in the country. So income's going very strong in WA. Unemployment trends here. You can see it trailing down since the recovery of the Perth economy, especially in about 2018, 2019. We sort of hit the bottom. You see that the grey line is job vacancies being advertised online, surging upwards, and unemployment surging downwards. So there is more jobs online than there are people unemployed in WA. I think it's about a 50% difference. So that is fantastic. If you want a job in WA, it's certainly there for you. Trade goods going very strong as well. Again, you can see this uplift from 2018, 2019 WA economy. Population growth, 3.1% in WA, number one in Australia. And we can see here, looking at this graph by Macro Business, sourced by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 90,000 people moved to Perth in the last 12 months. That's higher than the last mining boom, guys. If you look here, we were sort of sitting around about 75,000 people per year, you know, where we sort of got up starting in 2002, sort of, and then peaking in about 2012. And if anyone remembers what happens to Perth property prices between 2002 and 2012, well, they pretty much tripled in value over that 10-year period of time. And then we obviously had that lull, and now we're going back up again in population growth. And then the big one, guys, around housing supply, what we can see is there's the 90,000 people of population growth, dwelling completions sitting around 20,000 or less, okay? So dwellings being apartments, houses, places for people to live, 20,000 versus 90,000 people, right? That is like more than 4 times less, right? Now, on average, about 2.4, 2.5 people live per dwelling, right? So you can see here there's a massive, massive gap in supply versus demand of housing construction. And then we can see here that housing vacancy has been dipping since 2017, 2018, 2019, and it's massively undersupplied. We're sitting at about 0.5%. Anything less than 3% is considered a undersupplied market. So we are well undersupplied. And what we can also see here is over time, the blue line being house prices and the orange line being housing supply. So when housing supply started going up in the 2012s, 2014, it peaked, house prices started coming down. Now the opposite effect is happening. Whenever there is more demand than supply, you can guarantee house prices are going up. And here's the rent stats. In Perth right now, on the right-hand side here, the average is $640 a week. For a 4-bedroom house, $680 a week. And the highest rental yield, so this is a stat for investors. If you're looking to rent a property, this is why so many investors are looking at Perth right now as well, is because they can get great rental yield. For those who don't know, is the amount of rent that you get relative to the value of the property. So we're sitting at 5.2% rental yield in Perth. The average in Australia is 4.1. If you buy a house in Sydney or Melbourne, you get 2 or 3%, right? And then this is a huge one, listings for sale, guys. So what we can see here is listings total this week, according to REIWA, less than 4,000 total listings. That's houses, units, and land. Now, if you can see, this same week last year was 7,000, so almost double, okay? Now, housing supply of listings has been just about halving every year for the last 4 years in Perth. 4 years ago, we had about 17,000 listings on the market, right? So it is basically a situation where more properties are being sold every week than are coming on the market, which is suppressing supply. Okay. Housing affordability, obviously, with that high income that we spoke about in WA, we have the highest housing affordability. And then when we look at the property clock here, we can see Perth is massively in that rising market stage of the cycle. Now, these property clocks, guys, they can take 10 to 15 years to go around. You know, people talk about the 7-year cycle. It is a bit longer than that, really, when you look back at housing cycles and how prices have moved, and particularly in places like Perth. You know, we might have a period where we do nothing and then we do really well for, 6-7 years, ANZ and NAB Bank giving forecasts that we're going to have 10 to 11 or 9.9% capital growth in Perth. We did 18% last year. I think given the macroeconomics and fundamentals, it's looking very similar this year as well. And you can see here the investment purchaser percentages have massively changed again. WA having the second highest surge of increase of 22%. With this one, obviously, Queensland, sorry, they did 37%, but actually as a percentage has been declining, but there's still a higher percentage overall. But yeah, very, very popular with Perth investors. Final thing I want to leave you with, guys, because there's a lot of controversy about, society today and being a property investor and what that actually means. Now, it's a pillar for society support. It's a great slide by PropertyOlogy. There's 2.2 million property owners or landlords, investors in Australia who provide 90% of Australians' rental accommodation. And remember, about 1 in 3 people rent, about 30% of the adult population rent. So we provide 90% of that rental accommodation. The government provides very, very, very little of rental supply. In fact, if you look here in the middle left-hand side, government landlords since the 1990s have been decreasing. Council housing, government housing has been decreasing. So who's filling that gap? Who's filling that rental accommodation gap for society? There's always going to be a big percentage of the population who need to rent a property. And furthermore, we pay $10 billion each year in taxes to the government, whether that's council rates, capital gains, tax, stamp duty. So we are providing a lot of tax to the government, and we minimize the burden by $50 billion of aged pensions, because people who invest in property are typically going to be wealthy enough to self-fund their retirement, which means they don't need to rely on a government pension. So guys, I hope that was a really valuable use of your time and some great updated information about the property market. Leave us a like, leave us a comment, get in touch if you feel like you'd like to have a conversation with me and maybe see what's possible for you. Can have a talk to you about your numbers and what finance might be available to you, talk about your strategy and see if we're a good fit. And have a great day. Thank you very much.